Hi, my name is Matthew Kisveter, and welcome to my vlog on students in the digital age. Through the interviews and the student surveys, the process led me to rethink a concept that I call the disparity bottleneck. Example here is animated films are still stymied by a technological bottleneck. I contend that disparity between the haves and the have-nots is still the greatest issue that impedes or causes a delay in the process of educating children in South Africa. In post-apartheid South Africa, we still left with the residue and the legacy of what Bantu education has left behind in the society. What was Bantu education? Well, simply put, a recipe for underdevelopment. Decades of apartheid and segregation along racial lines, and you add in several ounces of no resources or poor infrastructure, in a system of oppressive laws and lowly opportunities that primarily ensured a migrant, underpaid workforce, baked in a temperature of violent or militant oppression, and cooked in decades of ideological engineering that entrenched a subordinating status quo and internalized inferiority complexes in the non-white majority and superiority complexes in the oppressive white minority. Teacher interview feedback. This was a colleague of mine at a school that I am a part timer at. She uses mostly Google Slide, Google Quiz, Kahoot, Google Classroom, Quizzes, and GarageBand. Interestingly, she says tech is useful because it allows students to cover the same content in a different manner. It is a great way to collect data for assessment. Ed tech tools like Google Classroom allow you to track and evidence progress. Now, Singapore being Singapore, all students mostly have access to the same level of technology. But I thought it even more pertinent to ask her if budget limits were not an issue. What tech would you want for your students and yourself? First world problems being first world problems. She said she would prefer if everyone had MacBooks as compared to her having a Surface Pro and the students having iPads. Some of the advantages of the use of tech in the classroom I thought was really interesting. She said it appeals to some students that who might not feel public performance is comfortable and feel more comfortable sharing work via screencasting or Apple TV than performance in front of their peers. Similarly, she says in GarageBand, for full music projects, as she's a music teacher, students can use loops or tools to aid their performance skills, allowing them to create compositions or realize ideas they may not be able to physically play. So those are great ways of using technology in a music classroom. What are the disadvantages of using tech in the classroom? It is not always used effectively, either through bad planning, underestimating what children are capable of. IT can be forced into topics where it does not enhance the educational experience. So, really, tech for the sake of tech rather than being an educational resource or tool to enhance the learning experience. What proportion of class time or time throughout the day is dedicated to using tech? And how do the challenges associated with learning during the COVID-19 pandemic influence your perspectives on the use of technology? To the first part, she says, I have no idea, but generally that is not my chief consideration. So, unintendedly, it might sometimes be 100% of the time, and other times it might be none of the class time at all. In regards to the pandemic, she says, I know for sure that no formal learning and or teaching would have been possible over the last 3 months without the use of technology. No matter what happens going forward, myself and my colleagues, in addition to all the students, I think, will have all improved our skill levels during this time in regard to the use of technology in the learning and teaching processes. Student survey responses discussed. Respondent number one was fairly curt and concise in their responses. As you can see, most of them are at most 2 words. It doesn't really indicate a desire to discuss anything in much of a qualitative sense. However, what is important here is that all the skills between listening, speaking, reading, and writing are described as confident, and speaking being very confident. Do you feel like you have adequate access to technology that supports your learning and activities and goals? Yes. Do you feel like you have any needs that are not met, or where you feel you are not supported by your family and teachers? No. Respondent number 2. I come from a fairly typical Chinese Singaporean family. I describe myself as Singaporean first. How does your family and cultural background influence your day-to-day life as a student? I think Chinese parents have quite high expectations of their children at school, and my parents are no different. Since young, I can hardly remember a day in my life that I do not have something to do or to attend in regard to an academic tuition or ECA, like a sports coach, singing or piano lessons. I just accepted it as normal. Importantly though, in a first world, attending tuition and ECAs require funds, therefore resources that children in the developing world do not have. Core skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing, described as confident or very confident, 3 of them. Question number 7 is a straight yes. Any needs that are not met or supported? Honestly, I've never thought about it before and I don't know what to say. Support the family, support of schooling, and tend not to think about emotions and school in the same sentence. Respondent 3. Indian Singaporean family. My entire family gives me so much attention, and I'm also the only grandchild. I have options for who cares about me, where and when. And in question 4, all core skills are confident. Adequate access to technology that supports her learning? Yes, sometimes teachers can be more supportive, but I'm not complaining. Respondent number 4 is actually an ex-student of mine in South Africa. Question number 1. I'm a Sotho South African and the son of a single mom who lives with his gogo. Gogo is an African word for grandmother. We look after each other really, but she is everything to me, even though my mother does her best to support me, but has to live in a different city to do so. His mother is a domestic worker and cleaner or maid in someone else's home. How does your family and cultural background influence your day-to-day life as a student? We live in a small semi-rural town, a bit of a distance out of Johannesburg, as that's where my grandmother's house is. My mother took a job in Pretoria, which is about 3 to 4 hours away on public transport. My schooling involves around 3 hours of traveling every day, but my mother and my grandmother keep reminding me of how lucky I am to have a place at a decent school in Johannesburg. They keep reminding me that they never had those opportunities when they were my age. I can't help but be tired at school, but I get very little sleep doing homework at night and having to wake up at 4:30 every morning. How do you feel you are developing as a learner? Question 3. I know I can do better, but I'm doing my best. I'm a little jealous of the kids who have extra classes or computers and stuff at home to help them do their work. We don't have the money for those nice things. Listening, speaking, reading, and writing, somewhat confident. Question 7. Do you feel like you have adequate access to technology that supports your learning activities and goals? No, but I'm happy that they replaced the computer that was vandalized at the public library in our town. It's not really available in the evenings when I could go, but okay, I wish to have more technology. Do you feel like you have any needs that are not met? And do you feel supported to the extent you need from teachers and family? Mostly, I think my life would be easy if I lived closer to school and if my mother could be home with us instead of looking after other people's children every day. Thoughts and conclusions. Why does it matter so much what student respondent number 4 had to offer? Well, that's because I know that that's quite a typical background in South Africa. So quite representative of this disparity bottleneck. In the contents of average income being less than half in South Africa, and the majority of the South African labor force being unskilled labor, earning on average $500 per month. And similarly, in the context where the average government expenditure per capita is $13,300 per student in Singapore and only $1,845 in South Africa. Additionally, In South Africa, you have an unemployment rate of 29% and a youth unemployment rate of 55%. In conclusion, my greatest concern in regards to students in the digital learning age isn't so much what educational tools can provide in terms of the learning experience, but more so that those who continue to have lack of access to the technology will remain behind, and therefore the disparity between the have and the have-nots will only be a greater gulf, perpetuating cycles of underdevelopment in the developing world.